It started on an overcast morning in Essex, when Ant Anstead slipped behind the wheel of a gleaming Ford Mustang he'd just refurbished and never imagined that simple test drive would become the moment his life fractured forever. For years, viewers around the world had watched his steady hands coax classics back to roaring life on wheeler dealers, admiring his calm precision and knowing smile. But on that day in 2018, something went terribly wrong. A snapped brake line sent the Mustang careening off a country road, tumbling into hedges and splintering timber. Ant escaped with his life, but the accident shattered more than just the chassis. It unleashed a chain of events that would haunt him for years to come. In the immediate aftermath, the image of Ant pulling himself from the wreckage went viral, oil-stained hair matted, shirt torn, eyes bloodshot from shock. Fans gasped at the sight of their favorite host sprawled against mangled steel, clutching a piece of his own creation as if it were a lifeline. Headlines splashed sensational claims of his near-death crash, speculating on the fate of wheeler dealers without its guiding force. But behind the sensationalism lay a deeper tragedy, one that no camera lens could fully capture: the fracture of trust between man and machine, and the dawn of a personal battle he never saw coming. For Ant, cars weren't just metal and pistons, they were vessels of memory and meaning. Each bolt he turned recalled weekends spent with his father, tightening lug nuts on a cramped driveway in Newport Beach. Those echoes of shared laughter became the foundation of his passion, forging a bond that transcended horsepower. To watch the Mustang explode into chaos was to witness a part of himself, boyhood dreams and fatherly whispers, shatter into fragments on the roadside. Though he walked away with barely a scrape, the emotional scars ran deeper. Sleepless nights followed, his dreams haunted by grinding metal and skidding tires. Every rev of an engine, every squeal of brakes reminded him of that split-second betrayal. His heart, once soothed by the pulsating rhythm of cylinders firing, now clenched at every turn. And as he prepared to return to set, the weight of fear pressed down like a leaden hood over his shoulders. Wheeler Dealer's production team scrambled to adapt. Safety protocols were tightened, insurance premiums skyrocketed, and the usually smooth schedule buckled under new scrutiny. But the true cost emerged off-camera: Ant's growing anxiety. Scenes that once felt like second nature, climbing into the driver's seat, revving an engine, cruising down empty lanes, now became psychological trials. His trademark grin replaced by tight-lipped concentration, he fought the urge to freeze each time he shifted gears. Comments from the crew about his subdued demeanor only amplified his guilt. He felt he'd failed the very machines he revered, yet the crash was merely the opening act. As the months unfolded, Ant discovered that tragedy has a way of echoing through every corner of life. His first marriage dissolved under the strain of sleepless nights and restless days. Conversations once filled with plans for new builds turned into muted exchanges about therapy appointments and medical bills. His wife, confronting the shadow of the crash, sought stability elsewhere. The divorce became as public as the accident, tabloids circling every courthouse appearance, dissecting settlement amounts and custody arrangements for their young son. It was a heartbreak all too familiar, another wreckage laid bare beneath glaring headlines. Ant threw himself into work, hoping to outrun the memories. Yet the shop offered no refuge. Every hammer strike, every weld, invited the specter of metal tearing and rubber burning. He found himself avoiding high-stakes restorations, opting for easy fixes that wouldn't push him past the edge. Producers noticed his hesitancy and considered replacing him, fearing this accident would tarnish Wheeler Dealer's reputation for fearless feats of mechanical mastery. Ant sensed the fault lines widening beneath him. Could he still be the show's linchpin, or was he already obsolete? Then came the day that forced a decision. A blue 1967 Pontiac GTO, an icon of muscle car heritage, rolled onto the lift. Its owner, a retired veteran, pleaded for Ant's help to restore the vehicle that had taken him home from war. That request pierced through fear like a spark through fuel. Ant stood before the GTO as if facing his own reflection, battered, bruised, yet brimful of stories waiting to be told. Despite the tremor in his hands, he agreed. This wasn't just another episode, it was a reckoning. Over the following weeks, cameras captured every weld and every wrench turn. Viewers tuned in not only to see the transformation of the Pontiac but also the transformation of Ant himself. They saw him pause mid-weld, breathe deeply, then lift the torch again. They saw his hands steadied by purpose, his eyes clear with the resolve to conquer fear. When he finally fired up the engine for the first time, that guttural rumble felt like a triumph of will over anxiety. But the tragedy wasn't over. Unbeknownst to fans, the crash had also damaged Ant's inner ear, causing vertigo that flared unpredictably. During one live shoot, the ground tilted beneath him as he crawled under the GTO, sending him tumbling. A cameraman rushed to his side as Ant lay gasping, the world spinning. Doctors diagnosed labyrinthine concussion, a hidden wound of brain and bone, and cautioned that another head injury could be catastrophic. Behind closed doors, Ant wrestled with the cruel irony: the very art he loved was now a threat to his health. He faced a crossroads. Continue wrestling with machines that betrayed him, or step away from the show that fashioned his career. Either path meant relinquishing part of his identity. His wife's departure and his health scare had already staked claim on his heart. Now, the shop's roar threatened to drown his remaining sparks of joy. The cameras captured his decision, and announced his departure from Wheeler Dealers, leaving a show that had been his home for 7 transformative years. In the months that followed his tearful exit from Wheeler Dealers, Ant found himself navigating a landscape of empty garages and silent engines. The roar of a restored V12 was replaced by the echo of a decision that reverberated through every corner of his life. Without the comforting hum of cameras and the rhythm of wrench turns, he faced the deepest machinery of all, his own doubts. When he stepped into a bare workshop, the space felt both familiar and alien, as if the walls remembered the old Ant but had no place for the new one. Every socket seemed to whisper reminders of what he'd lost, and every silent car body beckoned him to reconsider. Yet he would not turn back. He traded the high-stakes restorations for quiet collaborations, partnering with local craftspersons and fabricators who owned modest workshops just off the grid. These sessions weren't filmed, there were no deadlines, no producers hovering behind monitors. Instead, Ant and his new crew worked side by side, discovering that restoration could be a meditation rather than a race. They dismantled a vintage Fiat 500, cleaning grime from every hinge and polishing its rounded body until it gleamed like a whisper of nostalgia. Under the soft glow of hanging lamps, Ant's laughter returned, low and genuine, as he shared childhood stories about learning to change spark plugs with his father. With each careful adjustment to carburetor jets, he pieced together more than a car's mechanics. He pieced together the broken fragments of his own confidence. As he rebuilt his relationship with the craft, and also confronted the silence left in the wreckage of his personal life. His divorce had closed a chapter he never intended to end, and the absence of familiar family dinners weighed heavily. He began joining support groups for survivors of traumatic incidents, sitting in circle with strangers who bared their own stories of physical and emotional scars. At first, he listened, hesitant to unearth conversations he'd long tried to bury. But slowly, he realized that healing wasn't a solitary journey. Sharing his crash, from the jarring sound of metal grinding to the overnight phantoms that haunted his sleep, lifted the shame that had clung to him like rust. In the gentle glow of community center lights, he laughed at small victories, driving a restored Triumph Bonnie through winding lanes without flinching, or slipping behind the wheel of a classic Mini without gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. His gentle triumphs began to ripple into new opportunities. He was invited to guest host a live restoration event at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, a world-renowned gathering of motoring enthusiasts and industry legends. The offer felt daunting: one careless move, one moment of hesitation, and fear could snuff out months of progress. But Ant accepted, determined to reclaim his place under bright lights with the same steady calm that once defined him. When the cameras rolled and the crowds gathered around his chosen project, a rare Porsche 356, he took a slow breath, placed gloved hands on the hood, and cracked a warm smile. As he peeled back the body panels to reveal the car's aging internals, his confidence bloomed. The engine bay became a stage on which he proved that vulnerability and expertise could coexist, and that trauma need not overshadow talent. By winter, Ant's calendar brimmed with invitations to speak at automotive symposiums and mental health forums alike. His reputation had shifted, no longer merely the cool-headed fixer of classics, he was now a voice for those wrestling with invisible wounds. In speeches delivered to elegantly dressed audiences in city auditoriums, he wove a narrative that bridged metal and mind. He recounted the clatter of gears that once lulled him to sleep in the moment he realized that his hands could both build engines and reconstruct a fractured psyche. He spoke of therapy as a form of tuning, where each conversation and coping strategy was like tightening a bolt until the machine ran smoothly again. When he concluded by pressing his palms together in gratitude, hundreds of attendees rose in applause, some with tears glistening. Ant felt the quiet swell of purpose that no television credit had ever delivered. In spring, a familiar voice called, a broadcaster sought him to co-host a new Wheeler Dealers special, this time under strict safety oversight. Ant hesitated, mindful of the crash's shadow, yet he saw a chance to rewrite his story. When the cameras rolled, he greeted the new host with calm authority, offering guidance laced with empathy. As the engine coughed to life under his careful hands, he sensed a shift, fear and honor riding together. In that ignition, hope found a home in his heart quietly. Then came the announcement that seemed to seal his fate: Wheeler Dealers would embark on an ambitious world tour of restorations, chronicling the rescue of endangered classics from remote corners of the globe. Armies of fans awaited each episode, eager to witness Ant's masterful touch transform rust buckets into rolling treasures. At first glance, it was a dream come true, an opportunity to reclaim his reputation on a grand stage. Behind the scenes, however, Ant knew this meant trading the sanctuary of small workshops for grueling travel schedules and relentless deadlines. He hesitated, heart pounding, as he scanned the itinerary: remote locations in Mongolia, gravel roads in Patagonia, sun-scorched deserts of Namibia. Could his body and mind endure another crash course in extremes? The emotional stakes were higher than ever. Memories of the Mustang accident clung to him like a phantom hitchhiker. He recalled the moment the brakes failed, the car spiraling out of control, his heart locked in a silent scream. The brain injury that followed left him grappling with vertigo and unrelenting migraines. Doctors warned that stress and physical trauma could reignite those symptoms, possibly for good. Yet when he looked at the global stage laid before him, fans cheering his name, cameras poised to capture each wipe of grease, he felt something stir that he hadn't felt in years: the raw thrill of possibility. He decided to push forward, believing that conquering fear once more would cement the chapter of his comeback. Rehearsals began with an intense flurry of planning. Ant flew first to a scrapyard outside Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, where weathered hulks of Soviet-era jeeps sat half-buried in grasslands. The local crew spoke in broken English, offering noodles and the cautious kindness of strangers. Ant moved through the yard like a general surveying battlegrounds, map in hand, vision in mind. He explained to the camera crew that the goal was not just to restore these vehicles but to honor their history: tools that once carried herders across unforgiving steppe, now relics in danger of rusting into oblivion. His voice trembled only once, when he recounted how machinery had saved his life and how, now, he wanted to pay the favor forward. The local community watched in awe as he lifted panels, wielded his favorite torque wrench, and coaxed engines to life once more. As the restored Jeep growled to life beneath the wide Mongolian sky, Ant let out a triumphant laugh, equal parts relief and exhilaration. The next leg took him to a high-altitude workshop in Patagonia, Argentina, where temperatures dipped below freezing at night. Here, the challenge was an aged Land Rover that had transported scientists to glacial peaks. Its engine bay was a museum of grime and atrophied wiring. Ant's hands shook from cold as he pried away corroded nuts and sealed brittle hoses. One morning, he awoke to vertigo coursing through his skull, the workshop spinning around him. He steadied himself against a fender, sweat beading on his brow. A medic arrived, carrying a stethoscope and words of caution: if the dizziness returned during work, he must stop immediately. Alone in his tent that night, Ant stared at the ceiling canvas and felt doubt creep in. Was he risking everything for one more shot at glory? Or did this global mission carry a purpose greater than personal redemption? He pressed on, determined to complete the tour. In Namibia, a dusty village awaited a convoy of land cruisers that had delivered aid supplies for decades. The locals greeted him with shy applause, hands dusty from years of labor. Ant knelt beside a cracked engine block, loosening bolts with deliberate care. His mind wandered to the families whose lives these trucks once touched: children who'd received medical supplies, farmers who'd hauled crops to market. In that moment, he grasped the deeper tapestry: restoration wasn't merely about antique value, it was about renewing the lifeblood of communities. When he revved the final Land Cruiser at sunset, its roar echoed across red dunes and drifting sand. Ant closed his eyes and inhaled, feeling the sands of doubt slip from his shoulders. Back in the UK, the tour's finale featured a grand unveiling at Silverstone Motor Circuit. TV hosts and motoring legends gathered under the cavernous roof, expecting spectacle. Ant wheeled out the restored classics, lined them up like a museum exhibit under floodlights, and walked the tarmac as cameras clicked. At the final reveal, an immaculate Morgan three-wheeler, he paused, microphone in hand. His cheeks were hollowed, eyes ringed with fatigue. The applause swelled as he spoke, voice steady despite exhaustion: these machines saved lives, carried history, and we've given them a second chance. They remind us that resilience isn't just metal and oil. It's the heart behind the wrench. The crowd roared, but beneath the ovation, Ant felt a tremor. Had he gone too far? Days later, as the segment aired worldwide, he slipped backstage beside his dressing room mirror, shut the door, and lowered himself onto a bench. The adrenaline that had fueled him evaporated, leaving hollow energy in its wake. He stared at his reflection, grease smudged across his forehead, eyes bright with both triumph and trauma, and quietly acknowledged the truth. His body bore the scars of a man who'd raced fate and won, yet risked losing himself in the chase. He realized that global acclaim came at a cost he could not ignore any longer. That evening, Ant called his therapist. He spoke in halting sentences of the dizziness that surfaced in Mongolia, the migraines in Patagonia, and the crushing fatigue after Silverstone. He admitted he'd glorified the tour's success while ignoring his body's warnings. Tears welled as he confessed fear of letting fans down, of watching his comeback crumble. His therapist listened, then said gently, "You've proven your worth not by how often you race toward danger, but by knowing when to step back. Restoration starts within." Ant exhaled, feeling a weight lift. He made his decision the next morning. Ant announced on social media that he would take an indefinite hiatus from filming, citing health reasons and the need to focus on well-being. The outpouring of support was immediate. Fans and co-hosts flooded his feed with messages of love, encouragement, and gratitude for his honesty. He felt a surge of relief, tempered by sadness for the shows he'd leave unfinished. Yet in that vulnerability lay a new triumph. He had restored balance to his own life, choosing self-preservation over spectacle. Ant Anstead's journey continues, not on camera but in the quiet rev of a restored engine, the measured breath before a wrench turn, and the honest conversations that breathe life into healing. His tragedy reshaped him, revealing that sometimes the greatest restoration is the one we perform on our own hearts. In the weeks after announcing his indefinite break, Ant traded camera crews for quiet mornings in his private workshop. He installed soft LED lights over his workbench and swapped high-octane restorations for projects that coaxed gentle confidence back into his hands. Each day began with a slow ritual, herbal tea, 10 minutes of guided meditation, and a series of balance exercises to retrain his inner ear. He moved deliberately, mindful of every step and every breath, until the hum of distant traffic became a background track rather than an alarm bell. In this measured pace, he discovered that restoration could be as much about tending to his own nervous system as tightening any bolt. Friends and family rallied around him. His son, once sidetracked by court dates and uncertainty, now claimed a corner of the bench, offering spanners and sharing stories of schoolyard triumphs. Their laughter echoed through the workshop like reclaimed music, and as he guided his son's hands over spark plugs, Ant realized trust was something he could rebuild, piece by piece. He no longer chased deadlines. He let parts age in sunlight until his hands felt ready to polish each curve. A 1969 Triumph Bonneville sat under a cloth for days while he relearned how to breathe, how to look at metal without flinching. With therapeutic wreckage came unexpected invitations. Local support groups asked him to host hands-on healing sessions, guiding veterans, accident survivors, and anxious newcomers through the simple act of balancing pistons. Under his encouragement, they found that aligning engine parts mirrored aligning emotions, each smoothly operating cylinder reflecting a mind released from turbulence. Word spread, and soon Ant's workshop frequented headlines not for catastrophic crashes but for restoring hearts as much as cars. Fans flooded his social feeds with thank you messages. "Watching you tighten that gasket gave me the courage to confront my own breakdown." By midsummer, the tool company that once courted him for flashy endorsements invited him to co-create a line of low-impact wrenches designed for hands recovering from injury or stress. He sketched ergonomic curves late into the night, then tested prototypes on stubborn lug nuts and vintage carburetors alike. Simultaneously, a mental health charity asked him to co-host a webinar series exploring parallels between mechanical precision and emotional boundaries. His voice, once muted by fear of relapse, resonated with authentic authority as he spoke of snapped brake lines and snapped dreams, then showed viewers how both could be mended with care. In October, Ant accepted an invitation to speak at a global wellness summit in Barcelona. On stage beneath soft violet lights, he shared unvarnished memories of the accident, the bruising aftermath, and the vertigo that sometimes still danced behind his eyes. He spoke of divorce as another wreckage to navigate, of sleepless nights where the only escape was tinkering with pistons until dawn. When he finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation that felt like the warmest engine roar he'd ever heard. Back in his workshop, he sketched plans for a memoir-cum guidebook titled Life in the Slow Lane, Brake Lines and Breaking Points. He mapped chapters on crisis management, both automotive and emotional, and outlined illustrations showing how tightening tolerance on a bolt resembled tightening boundaries in a relationship. Each page promised to be a toolkit for anyone learning to rebuild from fracture, whether in an engine bay or a broken heart. By winter, Ant's new rhythm felt natural. Sunrise yoga led into mornings at the bench, and evenings slipped into live-stream chats where he shared honest progress reports on both his Datsun Roadster and his recovery. Gone were the adrenaline-fueled sprints of televised restorations. In their place stood a craftsman who had learned that true resilience comes not from how fast you race, but from knowing when to pause, breathe, and refocus. And though he still loved the visceral thrill of a roaring engine, he now understood that some of the greatest restorations occur within the spaces between the gears, inside the quiet chambers of the human heart. He found himself at a crossroads again when a renowned automotive streaming platform approached him to host a revival series titled Rebuild and Recover. The proposal was deliberately modest, seasonal mini-episodes featuring 3 builds, each centered on vehicles owned by everyday people who had survived major life upheavals. The concept resonated instantly. Ant envisioned a format that mirrored his own journey, cars healing alongside their owners, each wrench turn echoing personal breakthroughs. He envisioned a classic Chevy Camaro whose owner had recovered from a near-fatal stroke, or a battered Datsun 240Z owned by a veteran grappling with PTSD. The series would blend mechanical mastery with human stories of resilience, spotlighting both pistons and personal triumph. The first season was greenlit, and he accepted with cautious optimism, set on maintaining the balance he had painstakingly reconstructed. Production began in early spring. Ant's private workshop was transformed into a soft-focus studio, cameras discreetly capturing each careful oil change and measured torque. Unlike his days on Wheeler Dealers, where cameras rolled 360 degrees and producers chased sensational moments, here he retained control. Camera angles were low-key, edits favored authentic conversation over dramatic cliffhangers, and each episode closed with resources for mental health support. His on-screen presence was warmer, less scripted. He spoke directly to viewers, acknowledging his own path from crash survivor to coach for both steel and souls. His trademark grin had softened into a mentor's smile, arms open toward participants and audience alike. The first episode featured Maria, a young mother whose aging Land Rover was a lifeline for daily chores but had broken down when she battled breast cancer. As Ant and his crew worked through rusted brake lines and seized wheel bearings, Maria shared what the Land Rover meant to her, a vessel that had carried her children to school and herself to chemo appointments. When the engine finally roared to life again, her tears glistened in the workshop lights. Ant watched from the driver's seat, hand on her shoulder, and whispered that sometimes healing is a spark plug away. Filming wrapped without fanfare, yet the emotional resonance rippled through online forums where viewers shared their own recovery stories. Episode 2 starred Richard, a retired firefighter whose beloved 1973 Plymouth Satellite had served as his personal therapy after years on the fire line. When the car's transmission failed, Richard lost both his mechanical hobby and a crucial outlet for trauma. Ant and Richard dissected the gearbox together, and Ant taught him to fine-tune shift points as the veteran tentatively recounted memories of harrowing rescues. The mechanics of the rebuild paralleled the mechanics of healing, disassembly, assessment, repair, and reassembly. On the day of the test drive, they accelerated down a deserted airstrip, and Richard's headlights beamed like a soldier returning home. Ant's heart swelled witnessing a man regain both horsepower and hope. In the final segment of the first season, Ant chose his own Phoenix project, a 1965 Ford Falcon at the end of a friend's family lineage. The Falcon had belonged to his father, then passed to his brother before it sat idle in a neighbor's barn. Ant promised to restore it while acknowledging that he was rebuilding more than metal. During hairline welds on the frame, he spoke candidly on camera about how the Mustang crash had cracked his faith in machines, how his divorce had cracked his faith in love, and how, in return, he had welded a new creed, to believe in transformation. As the Falcon's engine sprang to life with a deep rumble, Ant guided it into a sunset drive along the coast, a symbolic glide from past fractures to forged futures. Viewer response exceeded expectations. Comments poured in from corners of the globe. I've faced my own wreckage. Watching Ant guide each rebuild gave me strength to pick up my own tools. This is the true spirit of restoration. Ratings soared, and more importantly, messages of gratitude filled Ant's inbox. He realized that by sharing his own vulnerability and focusing on collaborative builds, he had forged a new legacy, one not built on chart positions or dramatic headlines, but on restoration of both machines and minds. Midway through filming Season 2, a nonprofit reached out to partner on a mobile garage initiative for rural communities lacking repair facilities. Ant threw himself into planning lightweight toolkits, training local volunteers in basic mechanical and mental health first aid, and fundraising through live-streamed build marathons. Viewers could donate to sponsored toolkits or fund psychology workshops in tandem with mechanical clinics. The concept reflected Ant's belief that physical restoration and emotional restoration belong on the same axis. By the end of the season, he had helped launch mobile units in several underserved regions, from Scottish Highlands villages to Californian desert towns. As the second season finale concluded with the delivery of a rebuilt VW Beetle to a cancer survivor, Ant felt a profound shift. He was no longer chasing ratings or wrestling with fear each time he touched a throttle. Instead, he was part of a global community that recognized healing in the hiss of hydraulics and the clink of spanners. He returned to his workshop each evening, not with dread or adrenaline crash, but with quiet fulfillment, notes on next week's builds, messages from participants, and pages of his memoir guide taking shape as a blueprint for others. His public narrative had come full circle, from the exhilarating crash that fractured his confidence, through episodes of denial and reinvention, to a style of restoration that intertwined steel and soul. Ant Anstead had once tamed engines to validate his worth, but now he taught that true restoration begins in the heart and extends outward through wrench turns and shared stories. He had discovered that sometimes the greatest build isn't the car you drive away, but the one that carries you home. He sits by a steaming mug at dawn, reviewing pages of his memoir and guidebook manuscript. The title "Life in the Slow Lane" glows at the top of each page, a promise and a credo. He reads passages on crisis management and restoration, each chapter bridging mechanical precision and emotional boundaries. As the kitchen light grows, he underlines a sentence about torque settings reflecting personal limits, mindful not to over-tighten. A text pings on his phone. It's a former war veteran whose rebuilt Jeep he gifted with cherished memories now runs flawlessly. The message reads, "Thank you for giving me confidence back," a reminder of why he built his new show format. He closes the laptop and walks to his workshop, where afternoon sunlight streams through industrial windows. The benches are lined with tools that bear the patina of projects past, each wrench a chapter in his recovery. Soon he will teach a masterclass online on gentle wrenching techniques for hands marred by injury and stress. Tonight he plans a live stream Q&A, inviting followers to share both mechanical challenges and mental health struggles. A call from his agent interrupts his thoughts, inviting him to co-host a benefit gala for road safety awareness. He accepts, recognizing that advocacy for safer driving resonates deeply given his own near-fatal accident. The gala will feature restored vehicles and candid conversations, blending metal and memory under soft spotlight. Later that afternoon, he helps his son tune the carburetor on a vintage Mini, guiding small hands to steady adjustments. Their laughter fills the workshop as he recounts childhood memories of fixing cars with his own father. He feels gratitude for this chance to pass on skills and build trust where he once felt broken. When dusk arrives, he joins a virtual panel with fellow restoration experts and therapists exploring healing through craft. They discuss the symmetry between aligning engine parts and aligning emotional responses to stress. Each participant shares stories of transformation, their voices echoing his own journey from trauma to stability. In moments like these, he understands that community and connection are as vital as any mechanical fix. As the night deepens, he steps outside to the sound of waves crashing beyond his fence. He breathes deeply, recalling the first time he felt the ocean air after that life-changing crash. That memory used to trigger panic, but tonight it brings absolute peace. He whispers a silent promise to himself, never to forsake these moments of calm fulfillment. Back in his study, he pores over fan mail from viewers who restored more than cars through his guidance. One letter tells of a teenager who found solace in learning to rebuild a lawnmower and rediscovered purpose. Another describes a single mother who fixed brake pads and fixed her own sense of agency. These stories light him from within, reinforcing the power of sharing vulnerability. He closes the drawer holding keepsakes, faded photographs of past shows, old scripts, and a cracked headlight lens. Each object speaks of trials and triumphs, of the boy who nearly vanished and the man now determined to endure. His next project is a limited series of workshops in partnership with rehabilitation centers. He envisions mobile toolkits stocked with both wrenches and self-care guides for anxiety management. This dual approach will address both the rust of machines and the rust inside wounded souls. Days before departure, he practices demonstrations on a portable engine test bench in his garage. He films tutorial segments on maintaining calm focus when tightening bolts, demonstrating breathing techniques between turns. When filming wraps, he reviews footage with a heart full of accomplishment. He notices a frame where his hand trembles slightly during a cold start, a reminder that recovery is ongoing. Rather than conceal it, he leaves it in the final cut to normalize imperfect progress. As the clock strikes midnight, he drafts an email to his network of supporters and collaborators. He thanks them for contributing tools, time, and guidance to projects that restore more than metal. He invites them to join a virtual gathering to celebrate the series launch and share their own stories. With a satisfied sigh, he closes his laptop and turns off the lights upstairs. In his bedroom, he places earplugs by the bed, a ritual he's adopted to ensure undisturbed rest. Before sleep, he reads a poem about waves and resilience, the words echoing the rhythm of his life. He drifts off with a sense of purpose renewed, ready for the dawn of another day filled with gentle wrenching and shared healing.